This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-commerce Edge podcast. It is awesome to have you along with the ride for us today. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome my amazing guest, Mo AFSHAR from Pipe 17. Welcome, Mo.
Thank you so much. Great to be on the podcast, Jason.
It is awesome to have you with me today and have this great chat about all things tech, integration, and e-commerce. But before we get into you, before we get into Pipe 17, what you do, how you do it, this incredible thing called order management, etc., why don't you tell me how you even came to be in this space at all? Because everybody's got their own story, everybody's got their own journey. You've been doing this Pipe 17 thing for over 5 years. You've been in the capital game. You clearly come from a finance background and an investment background. But also with that bent of tech as well. Yeah. So how did you go from being in the finance game to, which you still seem to also be in, also deciding, hey, tech is where I want to be?
It's a great question. And I think many people think through this as they get slightly later in their career. And one of the things, certainly for me, was I've always been an entrepreneur. So built big businesses, whether it's at a big company like Oracle or at a smaller company. And after we built the last startup was in the voice AI space a while back, before LLMs were really a thing. After we exited that company, I was looking to do something different. So I said, why don't, a few friends who were on the investment side said, why don't you come with us and work with us? So that was my first foray really outside being an angel investor into kind of private equity or venture investing. And it was a really interesting time because it was around the 2018 timeframe when you're starting to see more and more logistics and commerce technology. And it was a wonderful time to look at the space, come up with a few theses around some interesting things that were going to happen, and then place some bets. So I looked upon it as an opportunity to play multiple end games, right? Because it was a startup, when you're in it, you only do one thing and you do it. When you're investing, you can afford to spread your risk a little bit. So as part of that exercise, ended up actually making a bunch of investments. One of them was in a company called Deliver, which of course most people have heard of, which was the 4PL network, which exited to Shopify and then Flexport. And that was a great investment. And then others like a company called Flock Freight, which does less than truckload loads. So the idea for that one, which is pretty simple, is that you apply the Uber pool model to taking partial truckloads from place to place. So I can load up my printers in San Francisco and they're destined for Chicago, and probably not in your case, but maybe some goods will get picked up somewhere along the way. And instead of having to load and offload. So as part of that exercise, I've always been in the commerce space. We started to systematically go through the different opportunities and where we wanted to place bet. And there was one area that we were looking at, which was, we asked ourselves a simple question, which is platforms like Shopify, making it easier and easier for people to sell and buy at marketplaces like Amazon. So the barrier to entrepreneurship, as Harley calls it, was getting lower and lower. Who was handling the operational complexity of businesses? Who was making it easy for merchants, for retailers, for 3PLs to be able to run operations? And we just asked ourselves a simple question, and we looked hard and we couldn't find something. And that was ultimately the impetus behind Pipe 17 and what it became.
Wow, what a story. And you're right. And the interesting thing about what you just said that sticks out to me is something that I have often said about e-commerce after 20 years of doing this, is that e-commerce is largely, or digital commerce full stop, whether it's omnichannel, let's just put it that way, omnichannel commerce, is largely logistics with a pretty face. That's largely what it is. Really, and even if we look at vaunted Amazon, they are a logistics company with a web interface tacked onto it, right? Mm-hmm. And they are exceptionally good at what they do. And that's one of the reasons why they win. That's one of the reasons why they're as efficient as they are. That's one of the reasons why they can be as profitable as they are. And they've mastered the art of taking a cost center and turning it into a profit center and spinning this off and being able to do Amazon logistics for everybody and being able to spin up basically FBA as well as being able to do delivery for omnichannel delivery. And so it's been an amazing journey for Amazon. It's been an amazing journey for merchants out there. And also, as you rightly point out, the barrier to entry to setting up an online business in the first instance has dropped through the floor, but the competitiveness has escalated as a result. And so therefore, creating a successful e-commerce business is now more difficult than it's ever been. And a sustainable one and a profitable one is very difficult. And one of those components, there's two components to this. There's the marketing efficiency of a business and being able to get customers and acquire customers in an efficient, sustainable way. The other is logistics. If you cannot get items into your customers' hands in an efficient way, you will not be in business for very long. And is that one of the things that you said, if I was to boil down e-commerce to its simplest components, it is really a logistical game?
Yeah, it's actually, it's a really good point. And maybe to double click on that, if you think about it broadly, there are a few challenges that a seller retailer has. One of them is being able to meet consumers where they are. So if I look at Christmas holidays and how many boxes arrived at our house and do a little bit of an audit, of course, there are many from Amazon, but there are also many from other places. When I talk to people, generally there is a plethora of channels through which consumers buy. The one that we've seen the most growth over the last 18 months on is TikTok Shop, where TikTok, obviously an entertainment medium, but when married with the opportunity to do discretionary purchase, it provides an amazing channel to connect with consumers. And so we were on the early beta for TikTok Shop with TikTok, and we're one of the marquee partners on the technology side. And we saw a huge uptick in our customers who adopted TikTok Shop. So the point is, as a seller, I need to meet consumers where they are. And whether it's TikTok Shop today, or whether it's one of the other marketplace platforms or traditional retail marketplaces or new social channels, there is an ever-driving force to meet consumers where they are. In tandem with that, and you touched upon this really well, which is you've got kind of Amazon, which is really a hyperscaler on the logistics side. People talk about it on the cloud side, but it is a hyperscaler on the logistics side. So then you have that vehicle, which has conditions us as consumers to get everything the same day or overnight. If you're in Seattle, like we are, right, order it at 1 a.m. and it like magically your door by like 10 a.m. 1 to 2 day delivery is something that imposes additional strains and complexity on the logistics side of things. You can't do it from one warehouse unless you're going to blow your entire parcel budget, right, on shipping across the country. You're going to need to do it across multiple warehouses. So you've got this complexity where you need to sell on multiple channels because you're going to have your own website. You're probably going to be selling on Amazon. Most people are. Some people are not, like Nike, but most people are. And then you're going to sell through other marketplaces. You're probably going to do retail. You're probably going to do social. And then you've got this complexity on the back end because people want their stuff quickly and they want to be able to return it and get their money quickly. And then you need to have good data because you got to know what's available to sell. And this plethora of channels, logistics, and systems in the middle is creating a lot of complexity, but also the perfect storm, right? As in, it's a problem that has to be solved at low cost. And that's the challenge.
And we have, in addition to the omni-channel challenge, and as part and parcel of the omni-channel challenge, particularly if you have a store estate, even if it's small, and even if you've only got 3, 4, 5 retail stores, many retailers, they want to be able to facilitate click and collect. They want to be able to facilitate ship from store. They want to be able to ship from DC. They want to be able to ship from 3PL. And they also want to be able to, for certain SKUs in their catalog, they oftentimes want to do drop ship. So we have so many additional complexities over and above channel proliferation.
Yes.
We also have shipping mode proliferation, and we also have order routing and orchestration proliferation as well. And so we've got this scenario where it's almost like a Tetris type model where we've got these orders coming down and we're trying to slot them in to the most efficient routing. And in some cases, the only routing to be able to get a specific item to a customer, especially where many retailers today, where if they've got an aggregated cart, maybe it's 10 items in the cart, maybe 3 things they'll fulfill from a DC, maybe 3 things they're going to fulfill from individual stores, or they want to give the customer the option to click and collect portions of their cart, but then ship the rest. So the modes of order management, and in all transparency, I've never worked with Pipe 17 before, but if I read what's on the tin, so to speak, I see you as a distributed order management system. Now, what's interesting about that is that it doesn't appear, and I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't appear that you're trying to be a WMS. It doesn't appear that you're necessarily trying to be an IMS, so an inventory management system. You have really niched down hard on the distributed order management and orchestration piece to the exclusion of almost all else. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Great. It's a great observation. So let's double click on that. So the short answer is yes, with a nuance. So our view is this ultimately, that certainly the first part of what you mentioned, which is warehouse management, it sits within a different context. We look at ourselves as feeding things into the warehouse. We don't want to worry about what goes on in the warehouse because we integrate with thousands of 3PLs, right? And that's more part of our value add, which is when a customer comes to us and says, hey, I want to look for a quick 3PL connection. We say, okay, we'll pick one of these, right? We're connected to one of these on the WMS side and on the 3PL side. So certainly on the warehouse management side, I think it's a given that's not a scenario we partner, and we don't want to be doing it because we are outside the warehouse, outside the black box. I think the bigger question when we stepped back and looked at this space, and this goes into the core of what Pipe 17 does, we looked at this kind of omnichannel proliferation. As you correctly said, there are also different delivery models like dropship and pick up from store and partial fulfillment and all these things. So there's all this complexity. And we asked ourselves this question, which is this operational complexity, how do people solve it today? We asked ourselves the fundamental question. And we talked to a lot of people, and their thing back to us was in two buckets. One of them was, we use an order management system and we can what that horrific experience was like, or they built it themselves. And many people decided to build it themselves because they were of the view that they didn't want yet another system of record. They thought SAP or NetSuite was good enough, but they wanted everything to be connected. Because without things being connected, orders don't flow for a start, but also data isn't consistent, so you don't know what you have to sell. Just scratch that heads a little bit when we said what the market's really telling us is that they want a lightweight solution that connects primarily and flows all the data, including orders, into every other system. And then, if needed, orchestrates. If not, let somebody else orchestrate, but gives the customers the flexibility to have whatever they want as the master and the system of record. So was our key insight is, oh my God. So what the market is telling us is that all the solutions out there are too complicated. They take too long to implement. And then they need to rule the world, and everybody needs to rework the way they work in the context of this new system, like ERP back in the 70s. And we're like, no. What customers wanted was to come forward and say, this is the way we work. SAP is our source of truth. These are the channels we sell to. These are the retailers. Could you make all of this work together and enable me to use my SAP system as a source of truth for inventory, for example, but orchestrate all the order flows around it? So we reached this conclusion that really in this market, and I think this is one of those markets that is being ill-served by technology, is that what customers want is a simple solution that connects and orchestrates across all these different systems. And what they were getting was, here's another system that could be the center stone of everything you do. We asked the customer, they're like, yeah, I don't want that. I just want my stuff to work well together. Why do I need another source of truth? And that's what ultimately led us do what we're doing, which is a very unique way of combining, we'll talk about AI in a minute, but really combining connectivity, order processing, order management in a single platform that fits into the way you work. And that's really unique in our view.
Into one thing you said here, which is that, for example, you might have a merchant that uses SAP or NetSuite as their ERP or E365 or Odoo or whatever it is. Pick your poison, so to speak.
Exactly.
In my experience, typically by the time a brand gets large enough to warrant a full-blown ERP as opposed to or ERP-like system, like a Sin7 or a Bright Pearl or something like that, doesn't do accounting and they plug into something like a Xero or QuickBooks for the accounting piece. That's why I call them a quasi ERP, because any ERP that doesn't do financials isn't an ERP in my mind. They're a quasi ERP or ERP light. And it's so interesting because in my experience, by the time somebody is large enough to warrant an investment in a full-blown ERP, they typically will take the order management module of that ERP and they'll onboard that in their business as their order orchestration layer, right? Now, where I would have traditionally thought you would make a perfect fit is pre-ERP, meaning that, okay, I'm a startup to 10 million or I'm a startup to 20 million in GMV. And there's this playbook, right? Especially for D2C and B2C brands, there's this playbook. Okay, when I start up, I'm going to start with Shopify. I'm going to start up with Klaviyo. I'm going to start up with Yotpo. And I'm going to start up with a pick, pack, dispatch plugin for my own local warehouse, a pick, pack, dispatch plugin that's a carrier aggregator plugin and lodges my consignments with the carrier. But I've got a manually organized warehouse and I've got a manually organized pick, pack, dispatch process. Then when I get a little bit bigger, maybe I bring in a WMS like a PeopleVox or something like that to replace my manual pack dispatch process. The WMS manages all of that and it integrates with the carrier aggregation system to lodge the consignments and then to bring the tracking details back down from the carriers into my WMS system. Then maybe when I get a little bit bigger, then I need a full-blown ERP, et cetera, et cetera. And so it would seem that you are perfect up until the point where a business is so large that they warrant and can justify the investment in a big, heavy-duty ERP process. But you're saying, no, even in a scenario where somebody has one of these big, heavy-duty ERPs, sometimes we are the better fit for the OMS piece.
Yeah, let's think. This is an amazing point that you brought up, which is really the evolution of customers. And I think the first type you mentioned, which is like Shopify, Klaviyo, some pick pack thing, probably QuickBooks in the background somewhere, right? To make sure the finance person is happy. So you get this kind of evolution, and then I'll add a couple of things to it. One of them is, you touched upon this, which is really the App Store becomes, when you're early and you're starting out, the vehicle through which your entire ecosystem works well together. And Shopify has done an amazing job of that, and Fighting View system works well together. On one of our AI and commerce summits about that. So I think that's that really interesting kind of phase one. I think Farhan, a few weeks ago, you do self-fulfill and you get PeopleVox, which of course we integrate with a bunch of other WMSs in there. You get PeopleVox, which of course at some stage during that process, your finance person says, we need better controls, right? Boils down to the essence of what Pipe 17 is about, which is we give you the choice to run your business how you like. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So one of our customers is Allbirds, right? And they're one of the archetype
D2C darlings.
Consumer darlings, yeah. And really interesting story on what they're doing around their products, because I've visited their offices and seen some of the stuff that's coming in 2025 and 6 and 7. So they're the company to watch, I think, in that footwear space. And we have a lot of other customers in that space as well. But if you look at what they do, their whole thesis is, we would like the ERP to be the center of the world, but we would need a platform that enables us to get the best out of that ERP. So we really want kind of ERP to be the hub, right? And this is where traditional order management falls apart. So when they come forward and say, hey, we're looking for SAP to be the center, in their case, SAP to be the center of the universe, most OMSs will say, oh, sorry, you can't do that. We need to be the master. They need to be the back end. And of course, Pipe 17 is no problem. We actually empower your ERP, right? So that, I think, is one of the most fundamental things that's different about what Pipe 17 does. We enable order flows. You can log into our consoles and look at all the exceptions, and you can have your operations people use Pipe 17 on a daily basis to figure out what's wrong and what's going well. But yet your ERP is the single source of truth. In some cases, that's not the case. So we have customers, for example, Wise Labs, which, if you're not familiar with Ring, they sell home security cameras. I think they're amazing. Yeah. And they use us as that backbone to flow the orders and orchestrate everything else. So we give everybody that choice, which is, we enable you to run your business the way you want. We connect everything to make sure all the data flows. If you would like us to orchestrate the order flows, we can do that. If you want us to orchestrate part of the order flows, like we do with one of Tom Brady's brands, Noble Shoes, if you're familiar with them, and in fact, other things, not just shoes, we can also do that too. And I think that's really one of the greatest flexibilities of the platform is that, and we really thought about this up front, which is we want to make sure that customers can scale from 10 million to billions with us. We don't want to be a solution that the more successful we are and the customer is, the more chance there is they're going to go and use something else. So that's why the adaptability and the choice really fit in to what we do, which is connectivity, order processing, one platform, but done the way you want it to work. And that's unique.
And it feels also like you are a little bit of an inventory management system as well, in the sense that there's not just a one-way integration of orders from source down to the fulfillment endpoint, let's call it, but also you need to be pulling inventory numbers back from those endpoints, particularly if, I don't know, let's say an item is returned, it goes into a quarantine location, then it's put back into inventory. So that endpoint's changing the inventory. We now, even if you're running NetSuite or you're running SAP or whatever it is, you've still got inventory locations and inventory counts in your ERP, but they need to be updated somehow. And you're almost also a piece of middleware. I wouldn't call you an iPaaS, but I would call you fulfilling some functions of what an iPaaS would traditionally fulfill. You do elements of that as well, so that in NetSuite, if inventory changes at any of those endpoint inventory locations, I'm gonna be reflecting the accurate inventory counts. And also, it feels like you would take over the control of SOH as well, stock on hand, meaning that at any given point in time, what orders are in the system, even if they haven't yet been fulfilled and decremented from the endpoint location yet, you're going to be decrementing that inventory immediately and shifting those inventory numbers back. So you become the inventory of record around inventory, right? Not just order routing and not just order orchestration and prioritization, but you play a much bigger role than perhaps if I was a retailer and I just came to your website and I had a look. I would assume, okay, cool. I can set these rules up to make sure that I'm running my fulfillments efficiently. I can set up my back order rules. I can set up my split shipment rules. I can set up my fulfill from store rules. I can set up, okay, which SKUs are allocated to a specific 3PL or region. I would assume I can do all those things.
Yes.
But it feels there's an essential place that you also plug a gap, which is, okay, I need to know at any point in a product's journey from inbound to outbound and sell through, I need to know what I have available to sell right now. And that feels like an essential role.
It's really insightful what you said there. So I think for us to be able to do what we do, we need accurate data. So let's say when we have an order come in, we need to know how to deconstruct that if it's not available from the same place to ship. So we need to know what's there, what's available in each warehouse, in each retail location. Retail side is harder, we know that. And so we need a consistent view. So really it boils down to this. There are two ways people deploy Pipe 17. One of them is where essentially the ERP is the hub. So think of like NetSuite's the hub. We pipe all of the orders from everywhere you mentioned, Dropship, Shopify, retail, POS, Lightspeed, Shopify POS, into NetSuite. And then we pull all the orders out of NetSuite into so in that architecture, we have the data, and people often use NetSuite as a source of truth for inventory. There is another architecture which we call the sidecar architecture, where the orders flow directly through us and we drop the orders into an ERP like SAP, right? And if you remember the old days of straight through processing in the trading world, it's a straight through processing model. The focus is on orders from cart to door as quickly as possible. And you bypass ERP and everything else in between because you want to get it there as quickly as possible. The challenge which we got into, really, you touched upon really well, which is not only do you have orders coming in, but of course, most sellers have both a wholesale business as well as a direct-to-consumer business. And you've got to manage these two. What do I want to sell where? What is the different pricing? And then, of course, B2B is now a big thing where you want to be able to sell not just wholesale, but also B2B. So you've got one pool, which is the nirvana, and you've got to be able to allocate that pool. And some of it could be pre-allocated, like Nordstrom, some of the lines of Noble shoes that sold through Nordstrom are kind of a Nordstrom thing. So then they will basically allocate that inventory for them, but it's not available for anybody else. But some of the inventory may be available for others or not. So you have to be able to have a consistent view of not only the present, but also the future, right? And that creates complexity because, I've got stuff coming in, this is coming in, I might be short. So we have to be able to take those things into account for us to be able to deliver to you an optimized business, which is you don't need as many ops people to run it. The system can run largely on its own and tell you when things are going wrong, and you save money on inventory. And this is such a key thing, because if you don't have the data together, like you mentioned, and we run into customers all the time where they have, one warehouse where the B2B pallets, and they have another warehouse that's direct to consumer. And one customer I talked to last week, $2.6 million of stuff. Like, they saved because they just managed to figure out a way to sell from one pool. And of course, their B2B warehouse said, sure, we can do fulfillment for you. And then all that pool is open. So you save money on physical goods as well, which is a really important thing. At the end of the day, kind of retail runs on that. You want to have stuff you can sell and know where it is and not lose stuff.
And I think one of the other challenges is what options you present to the customer in checkout, right?
Yes.
Historically, order management systems have only gotten involved once the order was actually lodged.
Yes.
Meaning, okay, the customer has hit buy now. Okay, cool. I got 5 items in the cart. Order management picks up the order and goes, okay, what's the most efficient way to route this to get it to the customer fast and cheap? And if they've bought a premium service, then we need to allocate it to a premium service and all the rest, right?
Yeah.
There's a new way of thinking that has really started to come into vogue over, I would say, really since COVID, to be honest, which is to surface some of that optionality and some of those functions to the customer so that they have more optionality themselves. Okay, cool. I want to know in real time at checkout what's available, where, and when can I get it? And what do I have to pay to get it by this time? And okay, cool. I want to pick up these items, but I want to have you ship these items. And then I want to have slow, medium, fast shipment method. And they all have different prices associated with them because we're going to be using different carriers. And one size does definitely not fit all, just like with payment methods. One size does not fit all. And so creating more optionality for customers and reducing friction without overwhelming them with options, but presenting them with smart options at checkout. And as they browse the website, being able to show them, for example, on a PDP, which store location has which inventory of these SKUs by variant, for example, this all starts to become really important. And it all becomes important data that has to come realistically from an OMS type system, or at least, or from some sort of inventory information. And based on the rules that we want to make available to our customers, those rules have to come from somewhere. And oftentimes that needs to come from an OMS like you guys. So how do you guys think about your role in presenting relevant contextual information and optionality to the customer as part of the customer journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you look at the way we've been conditioned, and I keep on referring to Amazon, only at the end of the day, they are 50% of online sales in the US anyway. So if you look at Amazon and the way you buy on Amazon, they do a few really interesting things. One of them is they're really clear with you when things will get to you. They're really clear with you how much time you have to actually press submit to get it by that delivery promise. So I think as we talk to brands and merchants and retailers, and of course we work with 3PLs too, everybody is interested in delivering this quality of service to the end consumer. Because at the end of the day, as you correctly said, not only does it provide a better customer service, but it probably helps with conversion, right, as well. And we know this because we have customers that sell on Amazon and sell on their own websites. And when you get this nuance in difference in delivery promise, you get to see what the behavior drives, which is people go and buy it on Amazon because they can get it next day. So I think there is a really important recognition there, is that the shopping experience is going to evolve. And the information that's available in terms of what goods are available, where they're available, and when they can be delivered, at what cost, is something that is going to work its way across the system. I think in some cases, that information is very easy to surface. Amazon FBA, fulfillment by Amazon. So if you're selling on Shopify, you can still have your pool of Amazon inventory. being the fulfillment source, Amazon will give that information through the APIs. Hey, here's like, in the same way they do on Amazon.com, they'll give that to you. That's not true of every 3PL out there. I
Yes.
think so, because not only do you need to have knowledge of how quickly is this going to be picked and packed, but you also need to have a knowledge of which carriers they have, and therefore which options are available and things like this. So,
And which delivery guarantee, timeline guarantees you're making at that service level, etc.
Exactly. So this is where this is something that absolutely will happen. We are working on it. And really from an ecosystem, which at the end of the day, we're here to support the ecosystem, we need two things to happen on an accelerated timeframe. One of them is for WMSs and 3PLs to give more transparency to platforms like us around, this is what I do. And the second part of it is we need to have a kind of, I want to say standardized, but almost like a standardized model through which this information surfaces into whether you're selling on BigCommerce one day and you're selling on some other platform like Commerce Tools the next day. So those two things need to happen for us to be able to deliver kind of what you're talking about. As you mentioned, we're like infrastructure that connects everything up. You mentioned the word middleware, which sometimes we say that, but we say connectivity. For us to be able to do what we do and to service the consumer in that way, we need the information to flow. And we need to be able to plug it into the selling channel, and we need to get it from the warehouse. And there's a little bit of work to do still on those two ends to make that a reality. Even if we could do it today, which is, yes, we can, but like, where do we put it? And where does it come from? And if it's not there, do we make it up? We can sometimes make some assertions based on the data we have, but it should really come from the back end.
And then the question also arises out of that, to my mind, is do we own the widgets and do we own the UI UX components on the website where you just plug it in like an app, like a Shopify app, and boom, this information is now available at checkout. Boom, this is now available on the PDP if you want it to be, and it's configurable through the app configuration. Or do we simply make available via APIs and let people custom develop that stuff into the experience? But then it's a heavy lift for especially smaller retailers to get that done. And so there's a lot of strategic questions about how do we surface this information in a meaningful way as part of the customer journey, and also give the customer the optionality and selection points to make these decisions about how they want to manage their order and how much they want to pay for that optionality, right? And so this becomes a really challenging discussion. But and do you think, is there anything that your customers are asking you to do today that you don't yet do, or are there other gaps in the market that you already recognize that you say, hey, we don't do this today, but in 12 months, we certainly will be? Where do you see the biggest opportunity for you guys to expand your offering that is going to have an immediate impact on the industry?
So let's root back to where we started from and we build from there, because we always think back to the core thesis. Commerce operations is hard. Many businesses of surprisingly large sizes still run on spreadsheets, right? Because of the fact that systems are disconnected and orders don't flow and data isn't consistent. And that's the best you can do, run it on spreadsheets. So if we go back to that core thesis, operations is hard, disconnected systems are the problem, and only when you have systems that are connected, data that is flowing, orders that are flowing, you can do these type of things like orchestrate them in the right way. If you're trying to orchestrate with poor data, you might as well not try, right? So I think for us, when we look at this, the areas of innovation are really around where we can have a 10x impact. So let me give you an example. If I'm selling on Shopify today as a brand, and I'm selling through a bunch of retailers like Nordstrom and Macy's and others. I'm also selling on some marketplaces. Maybe I'm selling on Amazon. I've got 2 or 3 warehouses I fulfill from. I'm doing international. I've got an ERP. I've got a return system like Loop. I've got a data lake. We are in the business of making all of that work together in less and less time, which means using AI to connect your endpoints, not in 2 days, but in minutes, right? So everything can be set up really quickly. Second, by using the information within our system, because information's flowing, to help guide you and improve the way you work, which is, hey, we seem to be having problems with this warehouse. It's raising a lot of exceptions, right? You may need to go and talk to them. Or, hey, the way you're running things, you're not optimizing on shipping costs. Maybe you should think about having a third node within your fulfillment network. So the second thing is using the data in our system together with learning models to try to understand improvements that people can have to their business in order to be able to run it more efficiently. And that also is true of inventory, which is one of the obvious cost factors. And then the third thing is, over time, enable the ops person, and we have an AI system today called Pippin that does these things, but to be the teammate of the operations people, because that's the problem we solve. We solve the problem within e-commerce operations, which is complex. So really have this teammate that works in tandem with the ops personnel to enable them to run their business more efficiently. And by doing that, and by bringing all of this data and intelligence into the fold, we can empower those operations people to save money and service the business much better. So broadly speaking, those are the areas where we're putting our innovation dollars in terms of making it more and more compelling so that more and more retailers and 3PLs and merchants can solve this operational complexity problem without hundreds of developers in the case of large retailers, or one or two developers in the case of smaller one. We want to do it in a coherent way. And there's a lot of work still to do to enable that, even with AI and other technologies.
And would you say that is your UVP, that is your differentiating factor versus something like a Linworks or a Fulfill or any one of a number of other products that claim to do similar things? Yes. Would you say that is your North Star?
Yeah, North Star. So North Star is a couple of things. There are many solutions out there, including lightweight ERPs, like some of the ones you mentioned, that will say, yeah, we'll do order routing, we'll connect and do these things. The reality of it is our North Star is really constructed of three things. The first thing is we enable you to connect your systems out of the box without developers. So you don't need an iPaaS, for those that are familiar with the term iPaaS. The whole concept of like me as Allbirds connecting to Shopify and then Noble connecting to Shopify, those two look 99% the same. So why does somebody have to build it with an iPad every single time? The thing is the same. It's 99% the same because we know what an order looks like in Shopify and what it looks like in NetSuite or SAP. We know that. So why are people having to rebuild all of this stuff all over again? It just makes no sense. So I think the first piece is connectivity is the core of what we do. We enable you to connect your systems. And that is one of the North Star pillars that will continue to be the case. The second thing is order orchestration or managing the lifecycle of the order as a capability as part of that platform that enables you to do things in a very simple way is the second tenet. We are there to kill the complexity. Our view in the market is order management is an unfulfilled promise because the systems out there are just like way too complicated for what 99% of people need. So the second pillar is simplicity around the order processing, and then tying all of these together with AI to make it better and more efficient for people to run their businesses from an operational perspective and to do it in their own way. I want SAP to be the master. I want NetSuite to be the master. I want you to flow the orders. I want this. I want that. In whatever way you want to have the flexibility you need. So that's the bow around those three things, which is having it in the way that you want it to work to give you the flexibility that you want. And that's the reason why a customer is going to production in a month, not like 2 years, which is what some of these other solutions will take. Because you can really make it support the way you work today.
I love it. Simplicity is, hey, Shopify built an entire business on the back of simplicity, drop dead simplicity. So It's a noble goal, no question about that. How do you guys make your money? Do you charge on a per transaction basis, on a per item basis? Like, how do you guys charge?
How do you? Look, I think we have pretty transparent pricing. We have a platform fee that covers the usage of the platform. And then there's something that is a proxy for orders. So it's very clear, like businesses of this scale, they do well, we support them. And so therefore we get to participate in that upside. Businesses that are like trundling along, that's also fine. So we share in some of the risk there. So it's a very transparent model. And that's one of the reasons customers love it, because it flexes with where they want to go. So it gives them the flexibility to manage their business and experiment with new ways of doing things. Like maybe we want to do dropship, maybe we want to do TikTok shop, and really get that going in a really quick amount of time and experiment around the business, which is what we enable them to do. We want to give them the agility to be able to do.
The vision of omnichannel is sometimes the vision turns into a nightmare very quickly unless you've got systems that are designed for omnichannel workflows. No question about that. Now, fantastic conversation. This has been great. Really enjoyed it. You're clearly very passionate. You're clearly very knowledgeable. You're shit, and I love talking to people that are both very smart and very passionate. That's a perfect combination I find in business particular. But now, as we come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question. Any question you like, can be personal or professional. So, Mr. Mo Afshar from Pipe 17, what is your question for me today?
The big topic on, I think, all of our minds is AI. And how quickly do you think it's going to change the shopping experience? I think that's one of the things certainly we've been thinking about long and hard, which is you could go into Claude, ChatGPT, hey, I want to buy a fridge, and kind of not go to anybody's website soon. And all of that happens. Yeah. What do you think's going to happen in that domain?
Look, I think there's a few steps in between then and now and then where I'm still frustrated by just my average desktop software. Xero, for example, when I go in there and I want to do something in Xero, I can't converse with the software. I got to click around. I got to try to find the function in the menu. I got to try to figure out how the function works. I got to software is just hard to operate today, and it's unnecessarily hard. I should be able to have a conversation with that software and say, this is what I want to do. Help me do it. Tell me what to do. I'll talk you through it. And I'll converse with you, and then the agent will do it. So I think agentic AI is going to start weaving its way and worming its way into software pretty quickly. And I'm still frustrated. And even as a guy who's a hardcore e-commerce guy, and I do 90% of my own personal shopping online because I just prefer it, even that, I think we're going to get to a place where when I go to a website, I'll have an option between two interfaces. I'll have an option between the traditional interface where I can search or browse through a category menu or a search bar, or I'll be able to converse with an AI concierge and say, this is what I'm looking for, or it will be able to ask me some smart questions in a two-way conversational style. And then instead of me having to navigate through categories or through an SRP page or something like that, it's only going to show me a curated collection that matches the types of things that I'm actually looking for, much as if I was to go into a jewelry store today. They're not going to just start pulling things out of the counter randomly and showing it to me. They're going to ask me 10 questions before they ever pull 3 or 4 things outside of the counter that they think I'll be interested in that matches my price point. Am I buying for myself or for somebody else? Am I buying it for a special occasion? What's my budget? What type of metal do I like? What type of stone do I like? All those things. They're going to ask some qualifying questions, as they should, before they present to me some things that might be a fit that will convert. And I think we're going to get to there first before we go through a third-party agentic AI layer to do everything for us. And even ChatGPT and everything else. And look, I'm a premium subscriber of ChatGPT Plus or whatever the hell they call it. I'm a subscriber and everything else. And I subscribe to several AI platforms. But the UIs are still shit in many instances. There's for all the promise that they present, they're still crap. Hallucination is still a thing. It's a massive thing, actually. And look, I think AI still has a long way to go. I think we're in very early innings still of the AI game, and the ability for AI to wholesale replace all of us, I think we're a long way away from that still. That would be my take.
No, it's super interesting what you said, because we have an AI agent, Pippin, which is a kind of ops teammate. And almost 90+% of the usage of Pippin is customers going in and asking me, how do I do this? Which is exactly what you said, which is you want an agent there that kind of you ask the software like, hey, how do I do this? This is the result you do it. So I think it's really insightful, and it's something we're seeing as well out there.
I love it. Fantastic conversation. I super appreciate your time. I wish you every success with Pipe 17, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.